Well, maybe.
But I before we go though, I would ask everybody just bend a thought to today's Pearl Harbor Day.
Yeah, tell us about your article. You did an article on this. It's going to be on
Well, yeah, I mean,
Project Sentinel on the Sentinel website tomorrow, I think.
The article is basically a story of two guys that I very serendipitously bumped into years ago in Monterey, California. They were both in their late 70s at the time, I would say, but and they were getting the haircut as I was. I was getting my haircut, and but these two guys, as the barber told me the story, is that after they left, one guy had been if you and I'll fill in in a little bit of detail here as you go along. One guy had been one of the officers on duty on board the battleship Oklahoma on December 7th, the morning of December 7th. And so he was on duty when the ship was attacked. And the ships were sitting, if you've never been to Fort Island, I mean, Oahu has a large port sort of sitting in the middle of the south side of it, and that's Pearl Harbor. And sitting in the middle of Pearl Harbor is a small island called Ford Island. And on the east side of the island, there were a series of these big cement pylons in the water, and the ships were tied up to these pylons. And USS Oklahoma was a battleship, had about 1,000 folks on it, 1,100 folks on it, 1,200 folks. She was one of the first ships hit in the attack. The attack started at about 7:52, 53 in the morning on December 7th, a Sunday morning, and we were convinced a very small but very significant failing. We were convinced that because the harbor was only 40 feet deep, they couldn't use torpedoes. You couldn't use airdrop torpedoes. Airdrop torpedoes, one of the things, I mean, you're flying along in an airplane, drop a torpedo from a couple hundred feet, and the torpedo drops down in the water. How far does it go before it starts working and swims itself back up towards near the surface? Well, in normal circumstances, a torpedo would go down 75 to 80 feet into the water. And so the answer was the harbor is too shallow, so they can't use torpedoes. Well, so the Japanese went out and figured out a way to do that, and we kind of missed that. So on the morning of the 7th, they dropped, the first thing that happened was airplanes came in and they started dropping torpedoes in the harbor. The first ship to be hit was the battleship Oklahoma. And she took 3 torpedoes very quickly, from like 7:53 to like 7:55. She was hit by 3 torpedoes. She immediately started rolling over to her left side. And she, in fact, by 8:10 in the morning, so very quickly, we're talking 15 minutes, she's rolled over onto her side, and she only stopped rolling because the mast hit the bottom. But there's one particular character, and the fellow never told me their names. Barbara wouldn't tell me their names. So they were faceless, and that's good because they sort of represent everybody. There's one particular fellow who was in the engine room when the ship got hit.
Oof.
And so he's under the ship, essentially as the ship rolls over, he's now, underwater. And he was underwater with a couple of other sailors. And I didn't add this detail, but as they were crawling through the dark in the ship there. So the ship is upside down. Imagine you're inside a giant steel ship. Ship is upside down. It's still getting hit by more bombs. There's all sorts of stuff going all around you. He grabbed a lantern off the wall, one of those small emergency lanterns. He had a lantern, and he grabbed a spanner wrench. As he later, according to the barber telling me the story, he didn't know why, but he did anyway. And he grabbed a spanner wrench, and they worked their way up, essentially up to the bottom. Have you ever seen the movie Poseidon Adventure? Sort of the same idea. And they get to the bottom of the hull, and there was a partition in front of them, and the partition was held in place by bolts. The bolts were the exact same size as the spanner wrench. So he took off the partition, and they were against the outer hull, and they started beating on the outer hull. They beat on the outer hull for almost a day until a rescue team came in and cut a hole in the hull. And he was one of the last few guys, he and the guys he was with, one of the last few guys to get out of the
I've seen
hull.
pictures of that when they cut them out. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's just, and they were, and this was a horrible, horrible thing. They were immediately rescue teams trying to cut guys out of the hull, out of the hulls, multiple hulls that had either sunk or rolled over. On West Virginia, USS West Virginia, another battleship. They found some guys when they finally refloated the ship. Took several months. They refloated the ship. They found some guys in a compartment that had been underwater, and they had died. They had suffocated. They had died, and they never got out of the compartment. But they'd had a calendar, and they had lived for 13 days in the dark.
Wow. Oh.
I mean, it's just a horror. So that was one character in this barbershop that I bumped into. The second character was a guy. He was the last duty officer. He was the last officer of the deck on board Arizona on December 6th. So on December 6th, the morning of December 6th, the day before, Saturday morning, right? He drives up to the pier, and his wife is driving. She's dropping him off. He's got his two sons in the car with him. So his sons get out of the car, say goodbye to dad. And apparently they're little, like, 8 and 10 kind of thing. And as they're standing there and the kids are saying goodbye to dad and wife is saying goodbye, you're going to see him tomorrow, just 24 hours because they're in port. Admiral Kidd, the commander of Battleship Division 1, Bat Div 1, Admiral Kidd, Isaac Kidd, pulls up in his sedan, and he gets out, and one of the little kids salutes Admiral Kidd. So Admiral Kidd salutes the kid back. And the kid says, "We're going to be with our dad tonight on the ship." So Admiral Kidd, Commander Bat Div 1, says, "You should stay in my in-port cabin." Which is this is unheard of. This is unheard of today. No one does this. But in particular, in the battleships, particularly the battleships made before World War II, they had command spaces that were, by all accounts, they were palaces. They were beautiful command spaces. And every captain of a ship, and if the ship is made up to hold a staff, the admiral space, admirals and captains have an in-port cabin, which is palatial, and an at-sea cabin. The at-sea cabin is where you stay literally when you're at sea, but it's near the bridge and it's near the operations center, so it's convenient. Well, the in-port cabins are gorgeous, and so Admiral Kidd said, I'll stay in my at-sea cabin. You and the boys stay in my in-port cabin tonight. It'll be great." And the lieutenant said, No, I can't do that." And the admiral said, "Yes, you can. It's all good." So, in fact, there's the ship burning. And so, in fact, they spend the night on the ship in the in-port cabin. Next morning, the guy gets up early, gets the kids going. They get on the launch. He turns over the duty, get on the launch, goes in, because he's going to meet his wife, and the four of them, the husband and wife and the two kids, are going to go to the 0800 Mass at the base chapel. And they were walking into the chapel when the first bomb hit. And those two guys obviously lived. Both of them later in the war received Navy Crosses, the second most senior Navy award medal. But this fascinating little incident here. And meanwhile, 1,177 guys died in Arizona, 489, I think it was, guys died in Oklahoma. These horrible, horrible events. These two guys happen to live. But it's think about them. Say a prayer for those guys.
Yeah. And I think they were the greatest generation, and it's amazing to think about what they had to do within the time they had. And we talked about some of the great Navy work in the Pacific. So it's something I think people ought to study more. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there on Europe and Band of Brothers, not taking anything away from the European theater, but I think the Pacific War is one especially notable.